Hello, can you guys hear me? Hello. Okay, can you guys see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll get started. Hi everyone, and welcome to today's session, which is live session 3. Today we'll be discussing lectures 7 to 9. Here are some important links. So the first one is the link to the session. The second one is the link to the YouTube channel where all the videos are being uploaded. And the third one is the link to the Google Drive where all the material for the live session, these PPTs are shared. I think I've shared this before, uh, but yeah, I'll be sharing this PPT also in the Google Drive after the class. So today we'll discuss the third module, which is ecological interactions. So we'll talk about positive interactions, negative interactions, and we'll talk briefly about the study of behavior and behavioral ecology. And in the next module, we'll look at energetics like food chain and food web. So we'll start with week 3, ecological interactions. So first of all, what are interactions? So interactions are basically effects that organisms in a community have on each other. So basically, for example, this tiger which is eating another uh, deer, eating a deer is basically like an interaction where the deer is basically the prey and the tiger is the predator, and the tiger is basically eating the deer for food. Right. Or we can have interactions like bees pollinating a flower, or also eating nectar off of the flower. So basically, any kind of effect one organism in a community has over any other organism is termed as an interaction. So there are two kinds of interactions. Mm, like we can divide interactions based on like how many species are involved. So in that division, we have two kinds of interactions. One is intraspecific and one is interspecific. So here intra basically means within a given species, and specific basically means related to species. So within a given species, we have intraspecific interactions. So for example, these birds, which are basically uh, trying to drive each other away from that place. So because these two are individuals of the same species, interactions that they have are basically intraspecific interactions. And we can also have interspecific interactions, which are interactions between different species. So for example, here we see a clownfish and sea anemone interacting. So basically the clownfish hides inside the sea anemone, which has tentacles that prevent predators from reaching the clownfish. And the clownfish is resistant to the toxins that these tentacles give out. So since there are more than one species involved in this interaction, it's termed as an interspecific interaction. Then, based on the effect an interaction has on its participants, we can divide interactions again into two categories. One is harmonious and one is inharmonious. So, harmonious interactions are basically positive ecological interactions where none of the participating organisms are harmed. And inharmonious interactions are basically negative ecological interactions where at least one of the participating organisms is harmed. So this division is mostly on the basis of if a interacting organism is getting harmed or not. So the main kinds of harmonious ecological interaction that we see from time to time when we are studying or when we are observing animals are these. So these are again divided into interspecific interactions and interspecific interactions. So in harmonious intraspecific interactions, that is positive interactions that are happening within a given species, we have colonies and societies. and then harmonious interspecific interactions, which is positive interactions happening with like among more than one different species. We have protocooperation, mutualism, and commensalism. So we'll take a look at all of them next. So first, colonies. So basically, these are interspecific interactions which are harmonic. So colonies are defined as functionally integrated aggregates formed by individuals of the same species. So basically, examples of these are coral reefs, filamentous algae, and microbial colonies. So in this image, we can see that there's someone has plated a lot of microbes, mostly bacteria, on a agar plate. And you see that each dot that you have here, or each streak that you have here. So, one second. Ah, So each dot that you have here, or let's say a streak that you have here, are basically not individual microbes or individual bacteria, but they are basically a aggregate formed by many different individuals that are carrying out the same functions. So basically, a colony is defined as aggregate that is functionally integrated, that is formed by different individuals of the same species. So all the bacteria that are plated in this plate belong to the same species. Right. Uh, Societies are basically the other kind of interspecific harmonious interactions, where basically we have a species that is uh, that has some kind of labor division and collaboration among individuals of the same species. So basically, societies are defined as interactions for labor division and collaboration among individuals of the same species. So, for example, uh, bees, ants, termites uh, are known to be like social insects, social insects. So basically, they have a kind of hierarchy of the different individuals that are present in the given species. So, for example, in honeybee, we see that there are three major classes or castes of individuals. So the So basically, we have the queen, which is a female individual in the given species or in the given beehive or colony. So the queen's job is to lay eggs. So that is all the queen does. The queen just lays eggs. Uh, a drone is basically a male honeybee that basically flies off from the colony to find other queens and mate with them. And a worker is basically a female other than the queen present in the colony, which basically helps in like building the beehive and maintaining the beehive and looking after it for day-to-day care. Okay. So similarly, ants have a caste structure and termites also. And we can also have societies in like other animals, such as in mammals, such as in wolves. So where we have uh, based on the social status of each wolf, they are designated to carry out certain different tasks, or they are designated to carry out certain different, yeah, basically tasks. And some of them are allowed to carry out some tasks, whereas others are not allowed to do those tasks, and so on. The next interaction we have is proto-cooperation, ecological interaction in which both participants benefit, but which is not obligatory for the survival of either of the species. So this is an interspecific harmonious uh, interaction. So more than one species, at least two species are involved, and harmonious as in there is positive interaction, like positive benefit to both the participants here. So basically, uh, these are interactions where both the animals of different species, both the organisms of different species enjoy benefits, but these interactions are not obligatory for the survival. Obligatory means necessary. So basically, even if these interactions don't occur, their species won't die off. So it's not like they need this interaction to happen, but this happens. So, for example, we have birds that eat ectoparasites on top of like other animals such as giraffes. So here what is happening? So there are a lot of different birds present on this giraffe neck, which are basically looking for and eating these ectoparasites or parasites that are stuck to the outside of the like to the outer skin of the animal. So what is happening here is basically the giraffe is gaining benefits because the giraffe is getting rid of parasites, and the birds are gaining benefits because the birds get to eat more food. Okay. Then the second example we have are these hippos. So they basically, there are these hippos and these cleaner fishes, which basically go around eating off things off the skin of the hippo, cleaning it. So basically, the fish here again gets food, whereas the hippo is getting cleaned and rid of debris and other things like algae and stuff. So this is also a positive interaction where both of them are benefiting, and it is happening between two different species. The third example we have here is of hermit crabs and sea anemones. So basically, this is a illustration. So basically, hermit crabs are like these crabs which basically don't have a shell of their own. So what they do is they look for shells that are discarded by other animals such as mollusks in the ocean bed or seabed. And once they find shells, they get into the shells and use them as their home basically. And the thing is, if they find sea anemones, they cultivate these sea anemones on top of their shell. So basically, they plant a sea anemone on top of their shell. So what happens here is basically the hermit crab is getting protection from other predators because they are scared to approach the sea anemone because of its tentacles, right? Um, Whereas the benefit that the sea anemone is deriving here is that the sea anemone can now move from one place to another looking for food. So otherwise, the sea anemone is a stationary animal on the bottom of the sea. But once it is on top of the hermit crab's shell, it can move around with the hermit crab looking for better opportunities for food. The next interaction is basically mutualism. So proto-cooperation is basically a weaker form of mutualism. Mutualism is basically a ecological interaction in which, again, both participants benefit. And the more important thing is this interaction is obligatory for the survival of both the species. So basically, without this mutualism interaction, these species would not survive. Right. So one example is microbes that digest cellulose in the stomach of ruminants. So basically, ruminants such as cows and goats and all, they have a special part in the stomach where they store these microbes or bacteria, which can actually digest cellulose that is present in plant material. Animals in general cannot digest the cellulose. That's why we cannot eat a lot of plant things like raw because our stomach cannot digest the cellulose that is present. However, these ruminants have a pouch in their stomach where basically they have a lot of these microbes which can digest cellulose. So what happens is the ruminants are able to digest the cellulose when they're eating a plant, and the bacteria get nutrition from the cellulose that they are digesting in the stomach of the ruminants. Both of them are positively getting benefited, and this mutualism thing, this interaction that they have, is obligatory for their survival because otherwise the microbes would not survive outside, and also the cattle cannot eat grass or leaves or other plant material without the presence of ruminating bacteria. Right. The second interaction that we have, the second example, is rhizobium in the root nodules of leguminous plants. So uh, on the right hand side, you can see the image here. So let's say we have a leguminous plant. So the root that this plant has often has a lot of these circular structures called nodules. So these root nodules basically contain bacteria known as rhizobium, which is basically a nitrogen fixing bacteria that is present there. So what happens is the bacteria fixes nitrogen that is present, the inorganic nitrogen that is present in the soil, converts it into nitrates and nitrites that the plant can then absorb for its nutrition. And whereas the bacteria does not need to make food, it just does this thing, and the food is provided by the plant. So basically, for survival of both of them, so for the plant to get nitrogen and for the bacteria to get food, this association or interaction is necessary. That's why this is an obligatory interaction in which both participants are benefiting, and that's why it's called mutualism. The next interaction we have is commensalism. So commensalism is an ecological interaction in which one individual benefits while the other is neither harmed nor benefited. Okay. So for example, here in this image, you can see that there's a buffalo and there are a lot of egrets that are standing around the buffalo. So what is happening here is the egrets are basically foraging along with the buffalo. And why is that? So when the buffalo moves through grasses, it basically moves the grasses and like basically what do you say? Vibrates grasses or like um, the other insects that are present in the grass are basically disturbed by these vibrations and movement of the buffalo in the grass. So they try to jump and run away from the buffalo. So what happens is these egrets at that moment when the insects are trying to escape from the buffalo or running away to a like more farther away place, these egrets are then going on and eating these insects. So here the buffalo is not getting any benefit or it is not getting any harm because the egret does not feed on grass and is not a competitor of the buffalo, or it does not decrease the resource that the buffalo is using in any, so it has no effect on the buffalo. Whereas the buffalo has a positive effect on the egret because it helps the egret find more food. The other example is basically bacteria and other microbes that live on our skin without being pathogenic or beneficial. So basically, we can have many different kinds of microbes. We can have pathogenic microbes which cause diseases and all. We can have beneficial microbes which help us in some things. So for example, we have a lot of beneficial gut microbes which help us digest a lot of things. For example, ruminants have those bacteria that help them digest. So these are beneficial microbes. But there are also other microbes which basically do not affect us in any. The only thing that they do is they eat off the dead skin cells that are present on our skin. So our skin is constantly shedding dead cells, and these bacteria then feed on these dead cells. So basically, they're getting a place to stay, and they're getting some food from us, so they're getting benefited. But it does not affect us in a positive or negative way because they are neither beneficial nor pathogenic. Okay. Does anyone have any questions till now? Feel free to ask or raise your. Actually, I can't see if you're raising your hand, so feel free to like unmute yourself and ask the questions if you have any questions. Okay. So next we'll look at um, the some of the main inharmonious ecological interactions. So inharmonious interactions are basically interactions where there is some negative effect on one or more of the participating organisms or individuals. So basically, yeah, inharmonious ecological interactions are again like can be divided into interspecific and interspecific interactions. In inharmonious interspecific interactions, that is negative interactions that are happening within a given species. We have things like interspecific competition and cannibalism. And in interspecific inharmonious interactions, which are inharmonious or negative interactions within among a group of different species. We have interspecific competition, parasitism, predation or predatism, and amensalism. So we'll take a look at all of them one by one. So first we'll look at competition. So competition can be either intraspecific or interspecific, but it is an inharmonious ecological interaction. So competition is basically the ecological interaction in which individuals explore the same ecological niche or their ecological niches partially coincide, and therefore competition for the same environmental resources takes place. So what does this mean? So as you guys remember, a niche is basically the position and role of a individual or a species or organism in the ecosystem. So basically, competition is happens when two or more individuals are exploring the same ecological niche or have some coins, like basically commonality between the different niches that they occupy, and therefore they are competing for the same resources that are present in the niche. So, for example, let's say we have some birds which are basically insectivorous birds which are eating insects on the ground. So this is species A, let's say. Um, Species A is a bird which basically is a ground dweller. So it's basically found close to the ground and it basically eats insects on the ground. And we have species B, which is basically a tree dweller. So which basically eats insects that are found in the branches of the tree or like in the leaves and everything. Right. So these two species are not in competition because they are having different ecological niche. So this bird is a ground dwelling bird which does not concern with the trees, and this bird is a tree dwelling bird which does not concern with the insects that are present on the ground. But let's say the species B, instead of just eating things on the tree, also sometimes comes down and eats insects that are found on the ground also. Okay, so now these species A and species B have some basically coincidence between the ecological niche that they occupy. So species A is again a ground dwelling bird, which ground dwelling insectivorous bird, and species B is both like a ground dwelling and a tree dwelling insectivorous bird. So basically, when both of them are present on the ground, they're basically competing for the same resource, which is insects that are found on the ground. And so, since their niches are partially coinciding and they are competing for the same resources, this is known as competition. So, competition can be of three types. One is intraspecific versus interspecific. The second is exploitative versus interference. And the third is apparent competition. So, we'll take a look at all three of them. Yeah, sorry. Okay. So, intraspecific versus interspecific competition. So again, as I had mentioned before, intraspecific means within species and interspecific means among species. So basically, intraspecific interactions are competition is competition that's happening within two uh, individuals of the same species. So for example, on the left-hand side here, we can see two deers basically fighting. And here we can see two kangaroos fighting. So basically, they are individuals of the same species that are uh, competing. So that's why it's called intra-specific competition. And on the right-hand side, we have individuals of different species. So for example, this lion and leopard or these two different birds. So they are basically competing with each other for, let's say, food or some other resource. So that's why this is called. So this kind of interaction that happens between two individuals of different species is called interspecific competition. Then competition can again be divided into exploitative and interference competition. So what is exploitative competition? So um, let's say we have a lot of grass here. It's a grassland. Okay. And they're basically cattle. And basically there are also like these black bucks. Right. So basically, these cattle and black buck, or like buffaloes and black buck, whatever, are basically both of them present in the same grassland, and they are competing for the same resource, which is the grasses. So they are both eating grass, and that's why if one of them eats more grass, the other one will get less grass to eat. So there's a competition here. So this kind of competition is called exploitative competition, where both of the participating species or individuals are basically competing for the same resource, for use of the same resource. So basically, both of them want to use it as food, right? And let's say, so this is example of exploitative competition. Okay. On the other hand, let's say there's a grassland here. And this time again, there's a black buck. Sorry for these drawings, but okay. So there's a black buck, and there are a few dogs that are present here. It's a 2 or 3 dogs. So these dogs are basically chasing away the black buck from this grassland. They don't want it to occupy here. And the black buck is scared that the dogs will like hunt it or like eat it. So basically the black buck is running away. So here also we have a type of competition between these two species. But in this case, what is happening? The resource is not being used. So it's just the access to the resource that is being blocked. For example, these dogs are blocking access to grass for this black buck, which needs to eat the grass. So here this is called interference competition. So basically, one species is interfering with another species, and that's why there's a competition. So exploitative competition is also called as scramble competition, because both the species or both the individuals are scrambling for resources. Interference competition is also called as contest competition, because there's only a contest for the resources, and resources are not actually being used. Right. Competition is exploitative when species or individuals compete for the same limited resource. So as we saw here, the black buck and the cow competing for the same limited resource food, which is the grass, is basically exploitative competition. Competition is interference when one species or individual deplete each other's resources by interference like aggressive displays or fighting. So basically, in the second case, these dogs are doing some aggressive display where they're basically barking and shouting, and this is carrying away the black buck, and this is so preventing the black buck from getting access to the resource, which is grass. In exploitation, organisms use up resources directly, so it is no longer available for use by others. Again, if we see in the first case, which is exploitative, once the grass is eaten, like let's say the black buck eats most of the grass, that grass is not available for the cattle to eat anymore. So the cattle will get less grass because the black buck ate a lot more, right? So basically, organisms use up the resource directly, so that it is no longer available for use by others. In interference, one organism prevents other from using the resources, as the dog was preventing the black from using the grass as food. Right. And the last point is there is no direct contact or conflict between the species or individuals in exploitation. So here we can see that even though there is competition, even though the black buck and the cow are basically competing for the same resource, which is grass, they don't have any direct conflicts or direct fights or direct interactions. They are eating the grass, and because of indirectly causing a shortage of grass, it is negatively affecting the other individual or species. In interference competition, there is direct contact or conflict between the species or individuals involved. For example, here the dog barking at the blackbuck is basically direct conflict or direct contact because both of the organisms are interacting with each other directly. For exploitative competition, competitive ability is the rate of resource consumption. So to measure the competitive ability of who is doing better in exploitative competition, we need to measure the rate of resource consumption. So basically for the blackbuck and the cow, eating grass, how fast they can eat grass determines the ability or determines how competitive they will be when compared to each other. Right. Now, for interference competition, competitive ability in interference is the ability to put on aggression or fights. So here in the second case, to measure the competitive ability, we need to see how long can the dogs basically maintain their territory or like drive away these blackbirds or fight with them. Right. In the pure exploitative competition can be modeled as affecting the carrying capacity. So basically, a given patch of land can support only X number of animals because of the amount of grass that it has or something, right? For blackbucks and for cattle. So this X number of animals that it can feed the patch of land is basically called the carrying capacity of that land. Pure exploitative competition affects the carrying capacity of the land for like between species. So basically the species A, which is interacting, let's say blackbuck, is directly affecting the carrying capacity of the area by eating a lot of grass. And thus the cows might decrease if the blackbucks eat a lot more grass than usual, or the other way around. Okay. Uh, Pure interference competition can be modeled as affecting the rate of increase per individual. So what does this mean basically? So this means that uh, interference competition, since there is no like uh, direct use of the resource, it's basically increasing the amount of resource that a species needs for the same amount of development. So, for example, let's say we have one case where there are dogs and there's a blackbird. Okay. So the blackbuck is basically prevented from using this grassland because of the presence of the dog. And in another case, there's a blackbuck and there's no dog. So the blackbuck can easily go to the grassland and eat the grasses. So let's say in this case, the blackbuck takes around 6 months to deliver a baby. Right. So basically, it needs energy to maintain a baby inside it. And basically, eating food gives it that energy, right? So depending on how much grass it eats, it generally delivers a baby in 6 months. But in this case, let's say because the dogs are hindering the blackbuck's entry to one grassland, it might have to go to some other place or it might have to find some other patches and spend some energy in traveling between patches or looking for places. So basically, that causes a negative impact on its energy. So because of that, let's say this blackbuck takes an average of 9 months to basically uh, sire an offspring. Right. Other things that might happen. So for example, like let's say this blackbuck needs 100 kg of grass to basically grow its body weight. This blackbuck will need 200 kg of grass because 100 kg of the grass is not accessible because of a dog that is present. Right. So basically, the rate of increase of the individual is affected by the presence of this species. So the rate of increase or rate of growth or development of this blackbuck is affected by the presence of this species. So that's how interference competition is modeled. For pure exploitative competition, the relationship between the rate of change per individual of one species and abundance of the second is non-linear. So What does this mean? So rate of change per individual of one species. That means if there are two species interacting, species A and species B, if the number of individuals of species A increases, what happens to the abundance of species B? So that is the thing that we are talking about here. Relationship between the rate of change per individual of one species and the abundance of the second species. Right. So yeah. So basically, yeah. So this relationship for exploitative competition will be non-linear. So it won't be linear. But for pure interference competition, the relationship between rate of change per individual of one species and abundance of the second will be linear because more and more individuals coming in. So, for example, more and more dogs coming in here will directly affect the black bugs by preventing more access to more patches of grass. So that's why this more and more dogs being added here will directly and linearly impact the abundance of basically black bugs. But in this case, since there is indirect competition and basically the amount of grass is the main factor, not the number of individuals of one species, this relationship between the rate of change per individual and the abundance of the second species is not linear. It's not linear. Now, what are some examples of all these? So, an example of intraspecific exploitative competition is when an organism is overgrazing on a land that is shared by several individuals of the same species. So, basically, the example that we talked about here, instead of having a black buck and a cow, imagine a cow and a cow, or a black buck and a black buck. So basically, organisms of the same species or individuals of the same species that are grazing or basically utilizing resources in the same piece of land or the shared piece of land, basically gives rise to intraspecific exploitative competition. Now, interspecific exploitative competition occurs in, for example, canopies of trees of several species. So generally, basically, sunlight for plants is a resource that they can use, right? So let's say we have a tree here like this, and let's say the sun is here, and this much amount of sunlight is what the tree is getting. Okay. So there might be another tree of another species which is present here, which might be competing with this species for the amount of sunlight. So it's trying to increase the area of its canopy by growing more and more branches till it no longer can. And the same is happening for this species. So basically, the growth of their canopy and the canopy structure, canopy cover, and like basically how the canopy is developing for both the species depends on the amount of available sunlight and the other species. So basically, this is interspecific exploitative competition. Now, interspecific interference competition is an example of that is basically an animal showing territorial behavior towards conspecific. So, for example, let's say we have dogs, right? Uh, let's say we have like a big area like this, and we have basically this part of the land is dominated by two dogs, two or three dogs, right? So basically, these dogs are not letting anyone else or any other dog come to this area. Maybe because they want this area for harboring mates, or they want this area because this has more resources or food. So that's why they're basically showing territorial behavior and they're like barking at other dogs that are coming from elsewhere or like trying to fight with them and shoo them away. So this is something very common that you guys also might have seen outside in the streets, like dogs barking at each other and fighting with each other. Generally, these are territorial fights. So once one dog leaves, so for example, like these three dogs might be barking at this dog when it is here, but when the dog moves away from the territory, these dogs won't care anymore. Right. So what is happening here is basically this piece of land, which might be a resourceful land or which might be harboring mates, is basically denied to this dog that is outside the social circle of these dogs. So basically, interspecific interference competition, because these dogs are interfering with the this dog or other dogs, and interfering with them and basically not letting them access resources. Right. Now, intraspecific interference competition, an example of that is allelopathy, where basically organisms secrete chemicals which basically uh, prevent the growth of individuals of other species. So, for example, you have let's say you have a plate where you have like grown bacteria only, and also you have grown the fungi penicillin. So basically, this penicillin, because this penicillin fungi is present here, it secretes penicillin, and that's why around it, so the amount of resource that this organism is using is basically the air surface area of this, right? But if you plate both of these, like my bacterial colonies and like penicillium, you'll see that in this much area, there won't be any bacteria, because this penicillium is secreting penicillin, which is basically a antibacterial compound, which basically kills bacteria. So here, interference is happening because these bacteria are denied use of these resources, these patches of area, and this is between two different species. Right. So plants also do this. So there are some plants which, when they grow, they basically secrete things from their root, so that plants of other species cannot grow here, and only plants of their species will be able to grow. This is called allelopathy. Means an example of intraspecific interference competition. Now, apparent competition. This is the third kind of competition. So apparent competition is an interaction between two prey species with a common predator. An increase in the population of one prey species may lead to an increase in the abundance of the common predator, leading to a stronger predation pressure on the second prey species. In this manner, the two prey species have a relation of indirect competition between them, mediated by the numerical response of the common predator species. Basically, what does it mean? So, let's say you have deer and cheetah, which are basically present in a forest. And both of them are hunted by this common predator, which is a leopard. Now, let's say there are a lot more deer. So the number of deers has increased a lot in the last 2, 3 years. So what happens is, since the number of deers has increases, the food available for the leopard is more now. So basically, this leads to indirectly increasing the population of the leopard, because now they can hunt more animals, gain more energy, and thus reproduce and like produce offsprings and all that. Right. Now, this increase in the abundance of leopards, it indirectly, it negatively affects both the deer and the cheetah, because there is more predation pressure on both of them. So this thing we are not concerned about. What we are concerned about is this: how this increase in deer population is affecting the cheetah population. So basically, by virtue of increase in the deer population, it is indirectly leading to increase in leopard population, which is the common predator for both the species, for deer and cheetah. And that's why this is the increase in leopard population is again leading to a what do you say? Stronger predation pressure on the cheetah, because now there are a lot more leopards to care about. There's not just one or two like before. Right. So this is known as apparent competition, where like increase in the number of deers might lead to a overall decrease in the number of cheetah. Right. So apparent competition has some interesting characteristics. Generally, the predator in cases of apparent competition is a food limited generalist. So what does this food limited generalist mean? Hmm. So what does this food limited generalist mean? So food limited basically means that it has a limited amount of food. For example, before the deer population overshot, maybe the amount of food or the number of individuals of deer and cheetah were less for the leopard. Right. In this case, we were talking about. Right. So food limited. Generalist means a predator that can prey on multiple different species. Right. So generalist is basically something that eats, forages, or preys on basically a larger or wider variety of species, whereas a specialist basically concerns itself with like one or a few different species. Okay. At times, some prey species. Oh, so yes. So, for example, in here, our leopard is a generalist because it feeds not only on deer but cheetah and also other ungulates. Right. At times, some prey species may even get excluded from the community through diffuse apparent competition. So, what might happen is, let's say all these three animals are staying in this community or in this locality. Right, there's the lion, there's the deer, and there's the cheetah. There might be a drastic increase in the population of deer such that there's a subsequent increase in the population of leopard. And because there are more leopards and more predation now, this meager population of cheetah has been excluded from this community. So basically, the cheetah, so most of the cheetah were predated upon, the rest of them ran away. Or basically, it might also lead to extinction of this species. Right. And the last point is, while the prey traffic level gets regulated by the predator, each prey species is regulated by an ensemble of the predator along with the available resources. So we'll talk more about this in the next class after the next traffic interaction thing is start. So basically what this means is like um, even though the predator has a general effect on all the prey that are present in a given trophic level or the prey that it is basically eating, the specific species of prey is affected not only by the predator but also because of the resources that are available to it. Okay. We'll talk about this more in detail in the next class after it has been discussed properly. Some examples of apparent competition are um, insect host parasitoid communities, where basically if there is an increase in a certain uh, insect species, abundance of certain insect species, it might harbor a lot more parasitoids, which might move on to other insect species and thus indirectly affect their health, like the leopard, deer, and cheetah. Exotic shrubs and trees through the action of seed predators. So what does this mean? So basically, exotic shrubs like let's say lantana and all, when they were introduced, they basically lantana has a lot of seeds. Right. So let's say there are trees, and there is this lantana that has been planted recently, or which is an invasive species. So basically, what happens? They bear a lot more fruit than the other different trees around them, and so thus this increase in this resource, which is food, leads to increase in like seed predators, which are basically birds or animals that feed on these fruits and like eat the seeds and disperse them in different places. So what happens is more and more number of species turn up that are eating these fruits and disposing. So basically, a bird might come and eat a fruit from here, right? And then it will go fly away and let's say sit in another tree somewhere. And then once it poops, the seed will come, the seed of the fruit will come there and another plant starts to germinate. Since lantana has like hundreds of seeds, it can basically grow much faster compared to other trees and native plants which might not have that many number of seeds. Great. And the third example is grasses and plants through rodents. So basically, bamboo flowers once every few years. It does not flower every year. So what happens is when there is a lot of flowering of bamboo, there's because rodents eat bamboo, there's a lot more rodents that are available in that area. And after the bamboo is basically uh, finished, like the rodents are done with eating the bamboo, they basically move on and eat the other tree species and shrub species that might be present in that area. So basically, this increase in the population of bamboo led to increase in population of rodent, which indirectly led to decrease in population of all the other plant species and shrub species that are found in that area. That's why this is apparent competition. Apparent competition results in the reduction of prey species equilibrium densities and growth rates and is a common phenomenon observed in several food webs. So as I was telling you about, this basically apparent competition results in the reduction of basically the prey density. So basically this apparent competition between bamboo and grass and other plants will eventually lead to the decrease in the abundance of all the other species and the growth rate. And it is a common phenomenon that is observed in several food webs. It helps us understand the dynamics of predator-prey systems and provides insight into the top-down regulation of food webs. Top-down regulation is basically from the top, let's say you have a predator, and basically below you have a prey. So the predator eats the prey eats something else. Right, let's say grass or something. So basically, this is a top-down effect. Okay. So how this top-down regulation occurs, uh, apparent competition sheds light on that. It also helps to create positive feedback loops for invasive species, as I was talking about lantana. So if there is more number of lantana in a given area, then basically there will be more number of seed predators. And since lantana can afford to produce these many seeds, these seeds will be transported into further areas and germinate and quickly grow, whereas the other animals which are not ready for this will perish. The other plants which are not ready for this will perish because of presence of seed predators, uh, huh, enabling them to quickly colonize newer areas by negatively influencing the established species. Thus, an understanding of the phenomenon is critical for proper management, conservation of, and health of ecosystems. So this tells us why learning about apparent competition is important. So there are some consequences that happen because of competition. So the first thing is niche differentiation. We talked about it briefly in the first lecture, I think. So basically, what happens is, let's say you have a pond. Okay. And let's say in this pond, you have two kinds of fishes. One is basically this triangular fish, and the other one is basically the circular fish. And both of them eat algae that are found on the top of the pond. Okay. So basically, since they are occupying the same niche or going after the same resource, they are in competition. And eventually, what might happen is some of these circular fish might find that they can also eat on small crustaceans that might be present on the bottom of the pond, like shrimps and all that. So basically, what they do is they start eating the shrimp, and basically, this after a while, all the individuals of the species start eating the shrimp instead of eating the algae, and only these species, the triangular fish, are basically eating the algae. So what happened here is basically the niche of both the species due to competition got differentiated. So both of them went their separate ways. The other fish, the circular fish, found a new niche, which was like crustaceans on the bottom of the pond, whereas the triangular fish stuck with the previous niche because it was it had more competitive ability, or it could outcompete the other one. So it was better at foraging the algae. Okay. The other thing that might happen is habitat displacement. So basically, uh, let's say we have a grassland here, and we have basically, let's say, black bugs that are generally foraging here, right? Um, so black bugs are the original species which are foraging here. But let's say after some time, there are these humans that come in with, let's say, dogs and with cattle. and basically they want to feed their cattle here. They don't want like the black buck to feed here anymore. They want to feed their cattle here. So that's why they came here, and because they have dogs and they are basically scaring away the black bucks start moving from this patch of land to, let's say, another patch of land slightly far away. Okay. So why did the humans come here? Because this patch of land has good amount of grass. Okay. Let's say it has a pond somewhere here. So it has access to water, and there are some trees, let's say, that give shelter. So basically, the human shepherd can basically sit below the tree while the cattle are basically grazing. Right. So these three benefits were also being used by the black buck, but since these cattle came in with the humans, the black bucks are no longer able to use this piece of land. So they move on to this piece of land, which is more rocky, which does not have water, and which does not have tree. So there is no shelter. Okay. So basically, this is the prime habitat where there are good resources and everything else is there. And this is basically subprime or suboptimal habitat. So basically, sometimes due to competition, so what happens, some species might be pushed to stay in subprime habitat, even if prime habitat is available, it's just not available to them because of competition. So this leads to basically displacement of habitat. So these black bucks are now moving out to subprime habitat, and maybe if like all the grassland that is present there, along with like grazing and all, let's say people are basically building things on the grasslands. So basically, once this habitat is getting destroyed, these black bugs won't have anywhere else to move also. Right. So they might come into the cities and all that. So yeah, these are the two main consequences of competition. Um, does anyone have any questions up till this point? Okay. Great. So we'll move on. Mm, So the next interaction is, which is intraspecific and harmonious. Inharmonious is basically cannibalism. Cannibalism is basically the act of one individual of a species consuming all or part of another individual of the same species as food. Okay. So basically, when you are eating another individual that belongs to the same species as you, it is termed as cannibalism. So examples of cannibalism are basically sexual cannibalism in black widow, where these like uh, females of the species, these big black widows that you have here, basically eat the males after mating. And the similar thing happens for praying mantis, where the female eats the male after mating. Uh, the next interaction is parasitism. So parasitism is defined as an ecological interaction in which an organism lives at the expense of another. So basically, one organism is positively affected and one organism is negatively affected. So there are two kinds of parasites. Huh. Parasites are of two types: ectoparasites and endoparasites. Ectoparasites are parasites that live outside the body, or basically live outside the body of their host. So basically examples include this leech, which basically stays outside and basically latches onto your skin using a sucker and then draws blood from your skin. So basically it's living off of the blood that is present in another organism. So it's living at the expense of another organism. So it's negatively affecting humans or animals, and it's positively affecting the leech. Endoparasites are parasites that live inside the bloodstream or inside the body of the host. So, for example, Plasmodium vivax, which is a microbe that causes malaria basically lives inside our blood and goes inside our blood cells and liver, where it basically reproduces. And it also goes into these mosquitoes, where also, which basically is a part of their life cycle. So when they are inside the host, so when a human is infected with Plasmodium vivax, basically they have a lot of fever, they have a lot of different symptoms of uh, like, yeah, fever, body pain, and all that. So it's negatively affecting the host because the blood cells and all are getting destroyed. But the Plasmodium vivax is able to reproduce inside the host, so it is getting positively affected. So that's why this is a uh, parasitism. It is parasitism. And these kinds of parasites which live inside the body of the host are called endoparasites. The next interaction is called predation, which is basically an ecological interaction in which one individual mutilates or kills another to get food, which is very straightforward. You see lions and leopards that are eating like deer, sambar, and buffaloes. Amensalism is another negative interaction where one organism inflicts harm to another organism without any cost or benefit received to itself. So, for example, when animals like elephants or blackbirds or buffaloes and all move through a given patch of land, they're basically trampling grass on the way. And what this is doing is it's negatively affecting the grass because basically the grass is dying or basically the grass is getting broken, you know. But and it has no effect on the animal, either positive or negative. So this is termed as commensalism. Now this is a table to summarize what all we have learned. So there are these different kinds of ecological interactions. Competition is an interaction in which both the organisms are negatively affected. So, for example, blackbucks and cows competing for grass, both of them are impacted negatively because if one of them eats more, then the other one gets to eat less, and so on. Amensalism is where the first organism is negatively affected and the other organism is not affected. For example, black bucks walking through grass destroys grass, but it does not affect the black buck in any way. Exploitation is when one organism is negatively affected and the other organism is positively affected. For example, parasites. Mm, we have parasites which are basically living off of their host, so deriving nutrients and everything from their host. So it's negatively affecting the host, but it's positively affecting the parasite because it's going to like it's surviving and reproducing. Neutralism is interaction where there is no effect of the first on the first organism or the second organism. Examples of this are very rare in literature. The next one is commensalism, where there is no impact on one organism, but there's a positive impact on the other organism. So, for example, egrets and buffaloes foraging together, the buffalo gains no benefit, whereas the egret gets more food. And the last one is mutualism, uh, one weak form of which is proto-cooperation, where basically both the organisms are positively benefited. For example, symbiotic lichens or uh, yeah, as we were talking about before, birds feeding on ectoparasites and basically animals like giraffe. So that was it for the first two lectures where we talked about positive and negative interactions. I'll stop here for 5 minutes. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. Okay, so we'll continue. So the third lecture dealt with study of behavior and behavioral ecology. So basically, we'll first look at some definitions. So what is behavior? Behavior is the ways that organisms respond to each other and to particular cues or signals in the environment. So for example, uh, these birds flying, uh, birds migrating basically is a behavior. It is a response to basically the environment where their environment is getting very cold, the weather there is getting very cold and inhabitable. That's why they're moving to other places to look for better resources. Right. Ethology is the scientific study of animal behavior. And behavioral ecology is the study of the evolutionary basis for animal behavior due to ecological pressures. So, how has animal behavior evolved? So, the behaviors that we see today, so these migration, for example, how have they come about? So, what are the ecological pressures that have led to this behavior? And basically, why do birds migrate and all that? Those are the questions that are dealt with in behavioral ecology. So some topics that are studied in behavioral ecology include foraging behavior, which is basically going around looking for food or going around looking for prey to eat. Anti-predatory behavior, which is what do preys do to get away from predators? How have they, what behaviors have they developed so that they can get away from predators? For example, one example of anti-predatory behavior would be camouflage. So chameleons and all can change the color of their body to match the substrate on which they are sitting. For example, if they're sitting on a branch, they can match their color to match that of the branch and thus become kind of invisible to the predators. People also study social behaviors, such as these tigers playing around in water, or example like dogs playing with each other, cats playing with each other, etc. And mating behaviors. So how do males and females of a species interact? And what do they do? Do the males, so for example, birds sing to attract females and the kinds of songs they sing and when do they sing, how do they sing and things like that are studied in behavioral ecology. So one ways in which one of the methods that is used in behavioral ecology is called cost benefit analysis, where basically we are assessing um, the cost benefit analysis is basically an assessment to determine whether the cost of an activity, cost of doing an activity, is less than the benefit that can be expected from the activity. So, for example, let's say we are talking about territorial behavior. Okay. So let's say on the x-axis we have territory size, and on the y-axis we have resources. Right. So, for example, let's say an animal is uh, maintaining a territory and driving away other organisms or individuals of the same species so that it can get more access to the resources that are present in that given territory. Right. So, as the territory size increases, the cost of maintaining the territory also increases. So this is not resources, this is basically cost or benefit. Sorry. So basically, this is the cost of maintaining the territory. So if it's a small territory, then a small animal, for example, let's say there's a tiger, and let's say this is the territory size of the tiger, and this is the tiger. The tiger can easily maintain this territory. So if someone is coming from here or anywhere, the tiger can easily look out and basically drive them away. Now let's say the tiger tries to occupy a much larger territory. Okay. So in this case, if the tiger is at this corner of the territory, it might be difficult for the tiger to see what is happening here in this corner. Right. So it gets more and more difficult for the tiger to maintain the territory because it has to continuously monitor and move around in the territory, looking for looking for other animals who are basically coming into its territory and drive them away. Right. Now the benefit is basically the amount of prey that the tiger is getting, let's say. So the benefit will be something like this. This is the benefit. So let's say this piece of land has around 2 deers, but this larger piece of land has 10 deers. So as you increase the size of the territory, the number of prey that is available to the tiger increases. But it increases only to a certain point, because after that, like if the territory is very large, so even if, like, let's say the tiger tries to occupy a territory which is this big, right? So now the tiger is here, and let's say even if there are like 50 or 60 deers in this whole area, the tiger can only eat, like, let's say the tiger can only eat 20 in a month or 20 in a year. So the presence of 50 or 60 deer does not matter to the tiger as much. Right. After a point, the benefit that the organism or the individual is deriving from the territory reduces. So that's why the benefit looks like this. So what cost benefit analysis does, it basically helps us calculate the profit. So profit is basically benefit minus the cost. Okay. So for example, this, so if you drop a line from this point to the x-axis, so this size, let's say it's y, this is the size of the territory at which the cost and benefit are equal. So the net profit that the animal gets is 0. And if the animal decreases the size of its territory, the net profit that it will get will be this benefit minus cost. Again, if the territory size is decreased a bit more, the profit it gets is this, and then it decreases more, the profit it gets is this. So we have, let's say, 3 instances. We have 3 profit values, P1, P2, and P3. So we see that P2 is greater than P1, and also P2 is greater than P3. So what this means is an optimal size for territory will be this size where the profit is the maximum. So this size or X should be the optimal size of the territory. So cost benefit analysis lets you determine why certain behaviors are the way they are by analyzing the cost and benefit of expressing that behavior and seeing if the benefits outweigh the cost. So one example of this, so one study done in Uganda found that basically try to answer the question, why do lions live or hunt in groups? Okay. So on the left hand side here, we can see basically, let's say there's just one individual which is hunting, so one lion which is hunting. So the success is basically, let's say 0.3. So on an average, if it tries to hunt for 10 prey, it gets 3 of them, right? 3 of the times it can catch a prey. Now what happens is as the group size increases, basically the group hunting success or the amount of times the group can catch prey kind of tends to increase because now there are more lions and they are cooperating with each other. So the upper graph here means that they're cooperating with each other. So this is the ideal graph. So if they're cooperating with each other, the group hunting success will increase as the group size increases. But if these animals are cheating, so if they are not helping each other properly, then the group hunting success will not increase even if the group size increases. So this study, what they found out was lions in Uganda. So this is again the expected curve. If there is cooperation, this is the expected curve. If there is no cooperation, there's only cheating. And what we see in nature is basically something like this, something which is in between both of these. So the lions that are living together or hunting together are cooperating, and sometimes probably cheating, but mostly they're cooperating, and thus the hunting success of the whole group is increasing. And probably that's the reason why these lions tend to stay in groups or prides. Okay, so now let us look at what are the costs and benefits of group living in lions. So if we divide lions by their sex and we do the cost benefit analysis. So for males, the cost of grouping is sharing of paternity. So, for example, in a pride of lions, if there are like 2 or 3 males, uh, a male cannot be sure that the child that is being born by the female of that group belongs to them. It might belong to any of the other males that are also present in that group. Okay, so they are sharing their paternity. So the uh, probably if they're not their children, their genes won't be passed. So that is the chance or the cost that they're bearing. But the benefit that they're getting is increased access to mates. Because if there was just one lion trying to find mates, it might have been difficult for it. But since there are 2 or 3 lions, they might get more mates more easily, and they might be able to defeat more other lions or other groups of lions. The second benefit they get is protection of offspring against infanticide. So, uh, what happens basically when a lion takes over another pride or defeats another lion or group of lions is basically first they go and kill all the cubs that are present in the pride. So this is done to ensure that none of the children of the other males survive, and also the females are then uh, don't have any duties towards their offspring, and the females can then mate with the new male that has displaced the original male. Right. So since there is grouping, the group success of lion in defending against other lions will be higher than one individual lion trying to defend against other lions. And thus the offsprings of that lion will be protected against infanticide because there are more males fighting. Now, for females, the cost of grouping is lower rate of food intake. So basically, they are getting lesser food compared to if they are foraging alone. But the benefits they get is help from kin. So basically, other members of the pride are helping them raise their children and find resources. And the second thing is territorial defense. So basically, males of the species do territorial defense and maintain a territory where the females can live. The other example of group living is like, for example, wolves hunting bison. So wolves can hunt in packs, and instead of individually hunting a bison, which is like very difficult, these packs of wolves might be easily able to hunt bisons. On the other hand, bisons are also group living, so they might be able to drive away a single wolf easily compared to a more number of wolves. So, what are the potential benefits and potential costs of group living in animals in general? So, the potential benefits include increased foraging efficiency. So, basically, you get more resources, you need more resources. You can find better places faster because there are more people looking out for better places. Reduce predation. Since there are more number of individuals, the chance of the predator eating you decreases because you are now in a big group. Right. There's increased access to mates. So a group will also contain individuals of the other gender. So basically, this leads to increased access to mates because if you are roaming around alone, you might not be able to maintain that many number of females. But if you are in a group and there are other males helping you out, then you can probably maintain a large group of mates. And the last thing is help from kin. So if you're trying to raise a child or forage, everything, you can get help from the kin and people that are living in your group. So the potential costs that you suffer from group living and animal suffers from group living is first of all competition for food. Now, since you are living in a group and you are foraging in the same area, you will be competing intraspecific competition between the same species. There is increased risk of diseases or parasites. So now, since you are moving in a group, some of you might be sick, some of the animals might be sick, and they might be transferring the sickness to other animals. So there are more chances of you guys of the group getting disease or parasites. The second cost is potential attraction of predators. So if you are alone and you are moving stealthily through a habitat, you might not encounter a lot of prey. But if you are living in a group of, let's say, 10, 20 animals, and you're moving around the patch of land or your habitat, you might be more at risk to attract more predators because they can easily find you and see you from far away. Right. The next cost is loss of paternity or brood parasitism. So basically, we talked about this earlier. If there are more males, you are confused about whether the child that you are raising is yours or not. And brood parasitism happens when, like, let's say, uh, another individual of another male, let's say, comes in and mates with a female and leaves. So basically, the male does not need to raise its own child. You are raising the child for him. Uh, and the other cost of group living is loss of individual reproduction. Again, as mentioned before, which is basically like you get less chances to reproduce if you're in a. So, okay.
बहुत ट्रैवल करते हो?
थोड़ा बहुत, थोड़ा नहीं बहुत.
Okay, can you guys hear this? Basically, these squirrels and other animals, they tend to uh, signal or alarm or warn other members of their species when they see a predator by emitting these loud noises, right? So what this does is basically it uh, increases the rate of it basically. One second.
Disturb.
Yeah. So basically, what happens is if an individual is, let's say, emitting alarm calls, right, when it saw predators somewhere far away, right. So what it's doing is it's notifying the friends and family that it has, that there's a predator around, go and hide. But so that is a benefit that is given to the group. But on the other hand, the predator can now focus on this animal because the predator can hear the animal and locate the animal. So basically, it is risking its own life to save the life of other animals of the same or other individuals of the same species. So people have studied these ground squirrels and they observed that females tend to call more than males. So these alarm calls are more made more by females than by males. So for example, here in this graph, you can see the white bars here represent what is the expected probability of a female calling when it sees a predator, right? And the black bar here represents what is the percentage of expect what is the actual observed uh, frequency of calling. So on an average, adult females are expected to call 40% of time, but in real life, if you check, they call more like 75 or 70% of the times. Similarly, 1-year-old females are expected to call for around 20% of the times, but they end up calling around 40% of the times. And we can see that adult males, on the other hand, are expected to call for around 25% times, but they only call for less than 10% of times. And 1-year-old males, again, are expected to call around 15% of times, but they call around 5% of times. And for juveniles, the numbers are almost the same. And the percentage is not that different. So basically, what this tells us is that females are more likely to be calling, making these altruistic calls. So altruism is basically when you are sacrificing yourself to save the group, right? So these females are more likely to make these altruistic alarm calls compared to males. Now, why is that? So basically, this gives rise to the theory and concept of kin selection. So kin selection and group selection are kind of similar things. So they're discussed together. Kin selection basically states that the evolution of traits that increase the survival and ultimately the reproductive success of one's relatives will be favored. So these squirrels that are producing alarm calls, what they're doing is overall they're letting the whole population survive. So they're increasing the chances of survival of their own relatives or kins, people, individuals that they might be related to, and thus leading to an increase in their ultimate reproductive success because the genes that these individuals have will also be transmitted to the future generation, and those will also contain parts of the genes of the original animal which emitted the alarm call. Right. Group selection basically says that natural selection for traits that favor groups rather than individuals. So natural selection generally we think of it acting as at the level of individual, but sometimes it might also act at the level of a group where traits are selected which will make the group survive even if at the cost of the individual. But the thing is, group selection operates much more slowly than individual selection, and therefore it is a much weaker selective force in most circumstances. Now, this theory of kin selection and everything gave rise to Hamilton's rule, which basically states that genes increase in frequency when Rb is greater than C, where R is the genetic relatedness of the recipient to the actor, where the actor is the person producing the individual producing the alarm calls, and the recipient is their related birth kin. So R is the genetic relatedness of the recipient to the actor, often defined as a probability that a gene picked randomly from each at the same locus is identical by descent. And B is the additional reproductive benefit gained by the recipient of the altruistic act. And C is the reproductive cost to the individual that is performing that is giving out the alarm call. So what this basically means is, so let's say we have a family tree here. Okay. So there are three children. Okay. So this is the parent. This is the male parent. Let's note it as P. And this is the female parent. Sorry, let's note it as L. M. Let's note it as F. Okay. So these two people or these two individuals have three children, and all three of them contain 50% of the gene of M, 50% of genes from F. And again, this is 50% of M, 50% of F. And this is 50% of M, and this is 50% of F. Okay. So now let's say there's a predator that's going around, and only these three children are around. Okay. So let's say in the first case, there are only two children, these two. We'll not consider this. So let's say these two children are around. Okay. So these two children are there, and there's a predator coming. So this child first sees the predator, but this child is probably looking away somewhere else. So let's say this individual is looking away somewhere else. So this individual, when it sees the predator, should it emit an alarm call or not? So according to Hamilton's rule, it should not, because if this individual sees the predator and runs away, 100% of their gene will survive. But if they make an alarm call and basically warn their brother or sister or sibling, what will happen is they might die, but their sibling will survive. And their sibling only has 50% genes of 50% of M and 50% of F, which might be a different 50% than this. Right. So actually their overlap might not be the same. So for this individual, it makes more sense to basically leave there and not make an alarm call. But now let's say the situation is different and there are three siblings. Okay. Now if the 100% of its own genes, but 50% of these two. So now let's say this individual sees the predator again. In this case, it makes more sense for this individual to make an alarm call, because if this individual makes an alarm call, both of these two individuals will be able to survive, while this might die. Right. So otherwise, if it does not make an alarm call, only this individual survives. If only this individual survives, only 50% of M and 50% of F genes survive. But if these two individuals survive, 50% of M plus 50% of F and 50% of M and 50% of F survive. So these two gene sequences might be having some overlap. So basically, it won't be 100%, but the combination of these two individuals will contain more than 50% of the genetic material of the parents. So even if this individual dies in the process of saving these two, which are siblings, direct siblings, it is still a better deal for this individual because it ensures that more of the genes that are present in this individual indirectly from its parents are surviving for the next generation. So yeah, this is basically the same thing written in words. If an individual loses its life to save two siblings, four nephews, or eight cousins, it is a fair deal in evolutionary terms, as siblings are on an average 50% identical by descent, nephews 25 and cousins 12.5. Basically, 50 into 2 will give you 100, 25 into 4 will give you 100, and 12.5 into 8 will give you 100. So you're basically saving more amount of your parents' genetic material than by saving yourself. That's why it's okay to take this deal. Uh, then we talked a bit more about territoriality. So I talked a bit more about territoriality. So territoriality is basically a type of intraspecific or interspecific competition that results from behavioral exclusion of others from a specific space that is defended as a territory. Uh, Animal territoriality aims at excluding conspecifics, that is, individuals of the same species, and heterospecifics, that is, individuals of different species, from certain areas using auditory, visual, or olfactory signals, as well as aggressive or ritualized behaviors. This is basically the definition of territoriality. Basically, if an animal is preventing a territory or a piece of land from being occupied by another individual of the same or even different species, it's termed as territoriality. Now we'll do a cost benefit analysis of territorial behavior. So what are the costs of territorial behavior? So it increases the energy uses since now you have to monitor the whole territory and look for intruders. It increases time demands because you need to be active more and see if people are not coming into your territory in your absence or when you're sleeping or when you're doing something else. Increased risk of predation. So because that whole territory contains only you, a predator will more, if a predator finds a prey, it will be you and not someone else from your species, right? And the benefits are after the territory is established, exclusive access to resources. So now, let's say a tiger has a this much big territory. So all the resources or all the prey that fall within this territory will belong to the tiger. So this individual tiger has exclusive rights or access to the resources that are present in its territory. Once it is established, the territory reduces competition because, again, this whole area is only available to this tiger and no one else is coming uh, here to feed on the prey, so there is no competition. And territoriality also regulates the size of the population. So, one way to view it is, let's say, for example, you have a large piece of forest, and let's say you have one animal which is not territorial, right? So it does not matter how close these individuals are. They don't need more than some amount of space to survive, right? Now, let's say in another scenario, you have the same amount of land. Let's say this is area A, this is also area A. And now you have a territorial species. So basically, this species needs more area to survive. So this individual needs this much area, this individual needs this much area, and so on. So now, even in the same area A, in this case, since there is no territoriality, animals can be anywhere, there will be more number of animals that are present. Right? Very high number of animals. So the population density will increase here. But here, since there is territoriality and one animal is not letting another animal go into its space or its territory, the animals will be distributed farther apart, and this would reduce the size of population or the population density that is there in this given area. So we'll talk about other methods that we use in behavioral ecology. So one such thing is looking at activity patterns and getting information from activity patterns. So for example, here we can see a graph basically, and this is basically the activity pattern of a tiger, and this is basically the activity pattern of a cheetah. And on the x-axis, we have time starting from 00, which is midnight, to again midnight of the next day. So this is 6 a.m., this is 6 p.m., and this is 12 noon. And on the y-axis, we have activity density, or the amount of activity that the individual is carrying out, or the number of individuals that are present outside. Right. So basically, we see that tigers are generally more active before dawn and after dusk during the night time, maybe, or the twilight period. Whereas this cheetal is more active during the day and maybe around 2 p.m. and let's say 10 a.m. And from these, by calculating these activity patterns, measuring these activity patterns of different animals, we can talk about how they are interacting and all also. So, for example, here we see that the overlap between these two is minimal, like very less, right? So we can see that we can say that this might be because the cheetal is trying to avoid the tiger so that it is not getting eaten up. That's why the cheetal is most active during these times of the day where the tiger is not very active. But the overlap is not zero. There is some overlap here. And that might be because the tiger is coming out early to attack the cheetal because the tiger also needs prey or food to survive. Right. Similarly, if we draw activity pattern for wolf and coyote, we'll see that it has much more overlap because both of them might be coming out together to forage and look for prey. Now, ethogram. So, in mostly in behavioral ecology and behavioral studies, the fundamental thing that we do first is that we prepare first is called an ethogram. So an ethogram is an inventory of behaviors exhibited by an animal during a behavioral exercise. So basically, it's a list of things that an animal is doing. For example, like if you are looking at a cricket, which is an insect, cricket might be at any moment sitting on a grass or a branch. It might be stridulating or making calls, right? It might be mating, it might be eating food, so on. So all these different behaviors will constitute the that are exhibited by the animal during your period of recording will constitute the ethogram. Now, how do we make ethograms? So first we'll start with the description of the study site. Then we'll have to define the behaviors that we see. Then we do what is called a scan sampling and a focal animal study. And then finally, we do a time budget analysis to see what happens. We'll walk through the steps. So description of study site. So for example, let's say you're going to study deers in some area. So let's say there's a pond in this area, there's a forest, and there are some deers that are present in the area. Okay. So describing all these things that are present in the area, maybe the species of the tree and the diameter of the pond and all those things will constitute your description of the study site. Next, we have to define behavior. So what all behaviors is the deer showing? So at any moment that we are looking at the deer, it might be grazing, it might be sitting. Grazing is basically eating grass. Sitting is basically maybe sitting down on ground. It might be walking. It might be running, probably running away from predators. It might be hiding in bushes. It might be drinking water. Right. or it might be also preening itself. So preening is basically when animals clean or lick themselves. So that is called preening. So these are like the different kinds of behaviors that the animal can show, the deer that we are concerned with. So basically making a list of all these behaviors and defining them properly is the second step. Then we do what is called a scan sampling. So we can do either a scan sampling or an animal study. So in a scan sampling, what happens is basically, let's say there are these 4 or 5 different animals, 4 or 5 different individuals of deer in the forest that you're looking at. So in the scan sampling method, what we would do is first we'll note the time. So let's say now it's 12 p.m. Then we look at this individual and we note that it's drinking water. Then we look at this individual and this individual is also drinking water. Then we look at this individual and this individual is probably walking. And let's say this individual is preening. And let's say this individual is again, like, let's say sitting. And then after we note all the behaviors that we have seen, we note the time. So let's say we made all these observations in 2 minutes. So the time is now 12:02. So having a collection of this, so the next one will start at, let's say, 12:02 p.m. We look at again all the animals and we note down what they were doing and so on and so forth. So the data sheet that we get the thing that we get, so basically the sheet that we get from this is basically looking at what the whole group is doing. Basically, we are scanning through the whole group and looking at what each individual is doing. And we are noting all the different activities. And this is called scan sampling. The other thing we can do is called a focal animal study, where basically we have one animal and we are focusing on that animal. And we are basically noting down all the behaviors that the animal is showing. For example, we can note down, let's say, drinking water. So when we started looking at the animal at 12, it was drinking water and it kept on drinking water till 12:15. So 15 minutes it was drinking water. Then it started walking. Let's say 12:15 to 12:20, it walked. And then it started preening itself and so on and so forth. So basically, focal animal study basically gives you all the behavior of a given focal animal or the focal individual. Now, once we have all these things, so in the first case, we might have like what are all the different behaviors exhibited by different individuals of the same species. In the second case, we might have what are the different behaviors exhibited by one individual of a given species. So all of these combined, we can make a time. So after this, we can do what is called a time budget analysis. So basically, let's say this is hours and this is behavior, number of hours or minutes or whatever. And let's say we have different behaviors here, like drinking water, walking, cleaning, and so on. So based on the data we have, we can basically make graphs to see how the animal or the individual is using its time. We can also make a pie chart of proportions of different basically. So let's say this is walking 30%, 20%, cleaning 20%, foraging 25%, and so on. So based on these things, we can do a time budget analysis where we are basically looking at all the different behaviors that are exhibited by a given animal or a given individual or a given species. And we are basically budgeting like all these different behaviors that they show, like how much time are they showing one behavior, how much time are they showing another behavior, Then we might have some observations. For example, let's say the deer is only eating 20% of the times, but it is looking out for predators, let's say 35% of the times. And if we replicate the same study in another area where there might not be that many predators, we might find that the deer is actually foraging 50% of the times and looking out for predators 10% of the times. Right. So carrying out these studies and carrying out this analysis can tell us about other different ecological things. So for example, here we can infer that maybe in this area there are more predators, maybe in this area there are less predators. Right. So that's why the time budget of the animal changes from one area to another or from one time to another. And we can also look at individual differences between different deers and how their time budgets vary. And maybe male deers spend more time in certain things, female deers spend more time in certain things. So that might lead us to think that, okay, so for example, let's say in the case of deer, females are more spending more time in feeding their young ones, whereas males are spending more time in driving away like intruders into like where they're foraging. Right. So we might also notice that there might be a division of labor in this case, right, in the group or certain things. So this time budget analysis is another analysis that is used in behavioral ecology, where we can ask and answer different questions in behavioral ecology. How like evolution of different behaviors have occurred in different animals. Okay. So that's it for this week. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, I'll just go over everything once again then, and then we can stop the class if no one has any questions. So, yeah.
Ecogram, sir. Ecogram.
Histogram, yeah. So, ethogram is basically a list of behaviors that an individual or an animal is exhibiting. So, for example, let's say you are watching a deer, as I was saying, this list that we made. So when you are watching a deer in a forest or something, you might observe like naturally these all behaviors: grazing, sitting, walking, running, hiding in bushes, drinking water, preening, chasing away um, intruders, right? Preening young ones, sleeping, etc. So these are all the behaviors that you have seen the deer do. So basically, you are making an inventory of all the behaviors you can expect to see when you are carrying out your study. And that this whole list of behaviors that you have now, this whole list of behaviors is called a ethogram. So ethogram is basically name of behavior and what is the description. So this is basically a table kind of thing where we have each behavior, what is the name of the behavior, and let's say grazing, and what is the description. So the deer is eating grass. Right. Preening, the deer is cleaning itself. And so on. You have all the behaviors that you have seen in nature during the course of your study and all the descriptions. So this is called a ethogram. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Does anyone else have any questions? Okay. So first we talked about what are interactions, what are intraspecific and interspecific interactions, harmonious and inharmonious interactions, so positive and negative interactions. Then we talked about different kinds of harmonious interactions like colonies, which are functional aggregates formed by individuals, societies where there's labor division and collaboration among individuals, auto cooperation, mutualism where there's a positive effect on both involved species. One is obligatory, mutualism is obligatory, proto-cooperation is not obligatory. Commensalism, where there's a positive effect on one organism but no effect on the other. Then we talked about inharmonious or negative interactions, where we talked in detail about competition, what is intraspecific and interspecific competition, what is exploitative and interference competition. Exploitative is when both of them are competing for the same resources. So there's indirect competition, and interference competition is when two species or two individuals are competing for access to resources or contesting for a resource. We talked about the different characteristics of these. We talked about examples and what is apparent competition. So apparent competition is basically when the increase in the population of a prey leads to a subsequent increase in some predator population, which indirectly negatively impacts another prey that is found in the area, which is the common prey of the same predator. Then we talked about examples of apparent competition, why studying apparent competition is necessary. We talked about some competition consequences of competition, such as niche differentiation and habitat displacement. We talked about other negative interactions like cannibalism, where one individual eats another individual of the same species. We talked about parasitism, where there's a host and a parasite, where the parasite is living at the expense of the host. So there are ectoparasites that are outside the skin and endoparasites that are inside the body, outside the body, inside the body. There is predation, where one individual mutilates or kills another individual to get food. There's amensalism, where there's a negative effect on one organism and no effect on another. Then we talked about behavior and behavioral ecology. What are the definitions? What is ethology? What is behavioral ecology? What are some of the topics that are studied in behavioral ecology? We learned about different methods that are followed in behavioral ecology to answer questions, such as cost-benefit analysis, which basically helps us assess why lions live in groups. We talked how to get at the cost and benefits of different things, such as group living in lions, cost and benefits of group living in other animals. We talked about altruism in ground squirrels and basically why females call more, uh, kin selection, group selection, and basically Hamilton's rule, how it helps us decide when to be altruistic. Then we talked about territoriality and basically how we can calculate cost and benefits of territorial behavior. Then we talked about other methods such as getting information from activity patterns and ethograms and basically making activity patterns and doing time budget analysis. Making ethograms and doing time budget analysis. So the steps that we need. First, we define a study site, then we define the behaviors, which is the ethogram. Then we do scan sampling or focal animal study, depending on our question. Then we can basically perform a time budget analysis to answer questions. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, if there are no questions, we'll stop the session now and we'll continue next week. If anyone has any questions or doubt, feel free to ask now or in the next session.